a legal loss thwarting the midterm plots he's been pushing. Democrats have been surging. Hakeem Jeffries could become Speaker if they win, and Republicans are fretting about losing in November. So Trump has been trying to meddle in what would be the ballots for that election. We can tell you the news, though. A judge dealing him a major loss, crushing and blocking the attempted executive order on mail-in voting. Now, let me tell you off top tonight, this loss is rooted in the Constitution. The president has no power to change this. Not the current president, not future presidents. This happens to be a Republican president who wants to do it, but if a Democrat tried the same gambit in the future, our system says no. Now, like many of Trump's fanciful executive orders, just trying to write down that he wished he had more power than he gets under the Constitution does not create that power. It actually doesn't do anything for him. And the judge is reiterating that, which is something everyone learns in law school. The president does not control elections or rewrite their local rules because the states alone determine voter eligibility requirements. The judge writing the Constitution doesn't grant the president any powers over the elections, and the states know that, and the judges know that. Obviously, their job is to interpret the law. Trump's lawyers know that. We'll take this back to me, yeah. I'm going to explain this in a second, but Trump's lawyers know that. Trump's lawyers basically let him barrel towards this loss rather than saving him the embarrassment, because as I'm telling you tonight, this was going to happen. You weren't going to just suddenly rewrite the Constitution to get control of elections. And now I'm going to explain what we showed you for a second, because this is really another humiliating example of Trump getting punked just by the law. And it's like an iconic scene in The Wire that is often quoted, including in this meme, where the guy without the power is told, yeah, you want it to be one way, but it's the other way. The judges have the power here. They are the character telling Trump that it's not the way he wants it, it's the other. Now, that's the headline if I were to simplify it with a pop culture reference, which we admit we do around here sometimes. I'll also tell you the details. The new ruling blocks federal officials from what are now Trump's frozen demands to make his own list of approved voters or do that through DHS, to probe officials who might give ballots to those people. Well, they're supposed to get those ballots. It also stops the plot to try to steal the race before Election Day using the Postal Service in a ridiculous sort of brazen effort that would try to deny people their ballots by mail. Now, Trump has tried before to turn the nation's mail carriers into some kind of voter suppression team. It's an echo of a failed plot from 2020. Donald Trump has long fixated on this. And nowadays, and this has come up a lot, so you probably know, but I'll remind everyone, the largest states in the country mail ballots to everyone, like California. And in the most recent election, which Trump won, by the way, roughly a third of the ballots in 24 came by mail. So this is how we vote. A MAGA plot to deny mail voting is a plot to deny voting, period. And that's a plot to end democracy. And I take no joy as an objective news anchor and reporter in telling you that the sitting president has been caught trying to end democracy. More than once, if you're counting. So that effort fails. Other judges dealt Trump a loss on the bids to try to seize voter rolls from states. He's 0 for 10 in these cases. And this matters because we've all thought about what's going to happen when you have someone who's already led and pardoned a violent insurrection gearing up for elections that seem like he might not win. And we know how he's responded to losing before. It matters, though, because as I've shown you, coups are not a solo activity. The 2020 plots that we've measured and shown you those arrows charting them, they required literally thousands of people, including that failed insurrection. And they only came after many government staff refused to break the law for him. So the new rulings I'm telling you about, which matter a lot for our democracy, no matter who wins, and if Republicans win fair and square, that's our system. We just need to have a democracy, not a dictatorship. The new rulings strengthen the resolve of people inside the government if they are going to be asked in the next 1 or 2 elections to potentially break the law again. It will deter those who rationally think about the jail time they could get if in a future administration there's a real DOJ that looks back at what they've done if they were to do it. Now, Trump's Postmaster General was talking up the proposal I just mentioned, which is now dead in the water legally, denying the ballots to people who otherwise would be able to vote in America if the Trump officials don't get the extra voter info they've been demanding in this shakedown.
If a state refuses to turn their absentee voter list over to the federal government, will the Postal Service still mail their ballots under this proposal rule?
Under our proposed regulation, no.
You're telling these states either give the federal government this information, trust the federal government, trust the Trump administration. We'll take good care of these. And if you don't do it, you can't mail absentee ballots. You're going to make a decision that people cannot vote by mail. That's unacceptable.
That plan, you heard the reference to a proposed regulation, is now DOA. And this happens a lot in the Trump era. You have people who are performing for the so-called audience of one. They go give their hearing testimony. They say, yes, that's the proposed regulation, but like Mike Pence and others, whether they actually at the end of the day want to risk going to jail once courts say no is a very different matter. That so-called proposed regulation, dead in the water. Now, when an executive order is flatly illegal, it does get stopped in court. Other plots can turn more on the details, on their validity. And that brings me to the second part of what I want to share with you in our opening report tonight. Because, for example, it's perfectly okay for the DOJ and the FBI to monitor polling locations to prevent voter suppression, right? To keep an eye on how things are supposed to go. But it's not okay for them to do voter suppression. Sounds pretty obvious, right? So when Trump does admit that he has improper motives for the DOJ or for certain government officials involved in the elections, he actually makes it harder for his DOJ to carry them out. And I'll say as an aside, this is why following the news or politics these days is so strange, because on the one hand, you see the president admit to something like that, and you are someone who supports democracy, you might say, gosh, that's terrible. On the other hand, if you want this to be fixed, it's actually better for the system that Trump blurts these things out and gives the courts and the system a chance to thwart and respond to them, rather than if he were, I guess, quieter. So that pattern has become a strange part of the long-running but often failed efforts to get the DOJ to bend the rules. And now I bring you another piece of news tonight. You can add this to the evidence pile. Trump admitting he wanted a Watergate-style plot, that he's pursuing this, that he did this to try to get the DOJ to do him a favor to meddle in the California race.
I called up the very powerful, very good U.S. attorney in California, and I said, do me a favor. Take a look. They're trying to steal that election, too. But the U.S. attorney called. We want to check your votes. About an hour after the call, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hilton has won. So had I not made that call, Steve Hilton would right now be watching the election from home.
Trump, in his way, trying to take credit, suggesting that somehow everything shifted an hour because of one phone call. This fits with some of his magical bragging that he does on the campaign trail, but he's also confessed to making that call to politicized meddling. This is the kind of smoking gun material that doomed Nixon in Watergate and certainly did cause Trump even more trouble in his first term. That's back when the DOJ was more independent, when it still appointed special prosecutors to investigate the sitting administration to avoid a conflict. That's why we had the Mueller probe. Now, Trump has thwarted those kind of investigations so far this term. But as we're reporting tonight, this is the problem we face. There is no reason to minimize or normalize what I just played for you, Donald Trump's confession. It echoes the confession he blurted to anchor Lester Holt all the way back in 2017. Do you remember that one? When he said, and this is Trump's confession, that his administration had been lying in a cover-up about the reason they made the unusual decision to fire an FBI director, James Comey, in the middle of his term. Trump's DOJ had insisted and put in writing that Comey was fired for mistakes that didn't have to do with the Russia probe of Trump's campaign. And then Trump admitted it was Russia, admitting a lie or making liars out of his DOJ leadership, a confession that haunted him, as many of his aides were later indicted in the Mueller probe.
I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
Confession. They had already said it wasn't about that. They had a different cover story in writing. And then he admits it's about Russia and the Democrats and his anger and his political goals. That was a journalistic interview that mattered. It yielded damning information. It led to the convictions, accountability, deterrence, because the DOJ system was working then. People like Paul Manafort went from being the #1 official in the 2016 Trump campaign to going on trial, getting convicted, being incarcerated. Well, today we know Trump has ground down the DOJ. Comey's not just fired. He joins these others on the enemies list, charged. A guardrail, though, has held, and that juries, grand juries in the courts have still required evidence, and most of these cases have been losing. While Trump's very tardy bit to get the Senate to now do what maybe the courts will not, to try to push new laws, to bend the rules, to maybe save or change the outcome in the midterms where Republicans say, and no one knows till there's voting, but Republicans say they're worried about losing. Well, that brings me to a final piece of evidence tonight that ties it all together. Because Trump's hope or prayer or demand that the Senate pass his voting plot drew a new fact check from the party's top leader, who says people like Trump, who want that voter bill, the Save America Act, are not going to get it, and they need to get a grip.
The facts on the ground are very clear. There are not the votes to meet the filibuster, and there aren't going to be 10 Democrat votes to all of a sudden support the Save America Act. Those are just hard realities, and I think people at some point have to come to grips with that.
You're not going to get it. He's telling Trump, you got to come to grips with that. How would you sum up that tough message tonight? You want it to be one way, but it's the other way.